What's up, guys? It's Eli Knight with the Knight Jiu-Jitsu channel. I'm here with my man Ed Stahl from Metrolina Martial Arts. Go follow his channel too. And I want to talk to you guys today about finishing mechanics for the straight arm bar. And I don't even know, it goes beyond that because I want to jump right into it and talk about this. Let's look at the arm bar from here. If Ed's on his back, and we'll talk a little bit about entries maybe, but the main thing is finishing this arm lock position. So when we get here, some common mistakes that might be affecting your percentage of being able to finish the straight arm bar. There's several. First of all, let's kind of talk about what we want to do. The arm has 3 points of articulation, right? So it's got the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, right? The biggest range of motion is the shoulder, right? The shortest range of motion is the elbow, right? And we're trying to break the elbow typically on a straight arm lock or hyperextended or sublux or whatever. We're trying to damage the elbow because it has the shortest range of motion. So the way he's going to generally protect that elbow is not with the elbow itself, is with one of the adjacent joints that has more mobility, like the shoulder. So when you're first getting into this armbar position, one of the biggest things that you need to account for is that I have this arm here isolated, and I have my hips nice and close, and I have a constriction around the shoulder. So that's taking all that mobility out of the shoulder, making it easier by proxy to finish that elbow lock here then, right? So one of the biggest mistakes people make is they're too far away, or their legs are too laxed, or one is off the head, one's over the head, whatever. All things can be finished, but like if for fundamental arm lock breaking mechanics, it's best to look at it like this. I want to scoop my hips at nice and close. There's going to be a squeeze with my legs, which is one of the most important items of it. And then there has to be a separation of the arms, which we'll talk about in a moment, because he's immediately going to come to defend it. So as we're going to finish this here, whether I'm hooking with the north or the south side arm here like this, as I'm going to sit back here, I'm expanding and using my back to open, elongate the arm, and I'm pinching his wrist in the crease of my elbow here. I can maybe finish from here, but it doesn't give me as much control over the arm as if I do this. Slide up, take the second hand, find the wrist, and then finally take this other hand off and find the wrist too for a double thumb grip. And that's gonna help me control the rotation of his wrist, which will be one of the processes in his escape. As I go to sit back, the squeeze of the legs, if you just watch the raise of his arm whenever I go to squeeze, it moves his arm just from the squeeze. So if I hold his arm down, that pressure has to go somewhere when I squeeze, and it tends to travel up the arm to the elbow, right? So that's the main idea behind it. Am I pulling it straight down? Am I pulling it across to one side of the hip or the other? All can work. Typically, if you take it south side, it's gonna have a little bit more braking capacity because it can go to the floor instead of running into my body. But most of the time, it should get the job done if I have it straight in the middle. Only in extreme cases where somebody's really flexible and the arm's not breaking, should I have to take it off to the side here like this, right? My heels in this process are being drawn in to keep myself close. If they're floating too much, Ed's gonna start to scoop under one leg or the other, and he's gonna start escaping by separating the legs out like that. So that's another consideration that I have to think of. So far in the order, whenever we get to this arm locking position or this kind of spider web position, again, however we got here, I'm keeping my feet scraped in, my hips are close up to his shoulder, and then as I go to hug this arm and elongate back, then the legs are squeezing in on the way down. So I'm gonna go here. First arm is hooked by the elbow. Second one is gonna come and uppercut through, pinch the wrist in the elbow pit like that. And then this hand slides up to grab that wrist. And then finally my second hand comes in to grab that wrist too. Again, you can finish the arm bar a lot of different ways. It's just that these mechanics here are gonna offer you the most control over the arm to isolate the movement that he's gonna be able to use to help escape that position. So let's back it up a step and kind of look at where we're setting this up from. Commonly from the mount position, if I'm on top and he's gonna give me unskilled energy first, it's gonna be just a straight bench press. As he straight bench presses me, I'm gonna give him dead weight back. I'm gonna cross my two arms inside. So one arm is going here, fingers up toward his face. Second arm's gonna go over and across it so that I'm putting his arm that I'm gonna break, which is this one in this case, between my two arms. I'm gonna put all my weight down on him so I can float up into this position. Now what happened there was my knee slid up toward the top of his head. My secondary leg circled around the far arm. What that does is it puts me in this S-mount type position. In the S-mount type position, what's happening is I'm encapsulating this triangular shape or this S shape of my legs around his shoulder carriage. That's gonna immediately make it difficult for him to twist, turn, sit up, anything. And then as I go to isolate this arm to take it away, to be able to finish the arm lock, sometimes I can even break it from this top mounted position. because I'm still getting all the things that I mentioned a while ago. I'm still getting the constriction of the legs, the squeeze of the legs here, isolating the shoulder. I still have his elbow captured in front of my pelvis, and I'm hugging here on the top of his wrist to keep the full leverage of that arm. I might be able to finish here, but if I need to slide off in this case, then this is perfectly fine. And now you notice what happened as I slid that leg over, I'm back to the elbow connection. So I'm isolating his elbow, making sure it doesn't slip below the line of my pelvis. The second arm here is gonna come up and scoop here now, right? And I get here on the elbow, my elbow to his wrist. The second hand slides up to grab his wrist. Finally, I have it fully elongated and stretched out that way, right? So now, we looked at setting this up from the mount position. And again, if he's here and he's just bench pressing up like this, it makes it pretty easy. Now, if instead though, he's not really bench pressing, instead he's kind of defending just by inches, that might not be the easiest thing in the world. So instead now I have to take a couple extra steps to be able to isolate that arm. A common way that we look at doing it sometimes is if I push one of his arms off center and then he goes over to rescue it because he feels that I'm attacking that arm. And then from that position now, I can start to slide my knee up behind his back, loop through his head here like this. And if you notice, from here, as I'm sliding up, I've got his shoulders stacked. When his shoulders are stacked, that means I've got good access to get my hips behind his shoulder here. And then from there, I'm gonna scoop the arm. I'm gonna slide my foot up deep into his armpit, and I'm gonna lean off to one side. What am I doing with this hand here? I'm either pushing his head down and away so he doesn't immediately sit up, or I'm going in front of his face, and that still locks his head in place, so it's gonna be difficult for him to twist, turn, or sit up. As the second leg starts to come over nice and light, I'm gonna grab and sit back here. I like to scoop up this arm if possible because that's gonna keep both of his arms between my two legs here, like this. I can keep them open, but if Ed's able to get his elbow to the floor, his ability to escape this arm lock is gonna be greatly enhanced, right? So it's better if I've got both legs over, if I can reach the far side arm. Because at this point now, I can cross my two ankles here, right? Which we'll talk about when that's acceptable and not acceptable. But as I'm pulling these in, now his ability to pull and defend his arm is extremely compromised. And I can slide up, boom, here this way, and then grab, elongate out, just like we did before. So when we get into this position here, right, I wanna make sure that I think about when is it okay to cross my ankles and when is it not. Generally in the beginning, we tell beginners, don't cross your ankles on an arm bar. Here's why. If I get here and I cross my 2 feet like this, if Ed just pushes both my legs above or below his head here like this, right, he's gonna kill the angle, be able to sit up, or he's gonna throw these legs over his head and be able to come out that way because it's not too hard to move them, because what's happening, I've got them crossed and elongated straight out. So it's basically just making one leg, right? That's no good. So now, does that mean it's wrong? No, I can absolutely cross my ankles this way because look how bunched up they are. There's no way Ed's gonna get under that space that he needs to. That's okay. If they're under his armpit, also completely okay to cross my ankles. It's gonna be hard for him to take advantage of the fact that they're crossed here, right? And there's also advantages to this because of the way I'm isolating head, shoulder, far side armpit. If his arm is between, probably the best time to cross the ankles, because not only am I crossing, I'm not crossing and extending, I'm crossing and pulling in. So if Ed is trying to rescue his arm like this, just me pulling the legs together here help to separate that arm connection and get this free. And we'll talk about a couple other ways that I can separate those arms if he's defending certain ways. So as far as it goes, as far as crossing the ankles, there's lots of variations of ways that you can cross the ankles that will get you the arm bar. But it's just that you have to understand when somebody says, don't do this on a move, why are they telling you not to do it? That's the more important thing. So again, we get into this breaking kind of position. What is Ed typically gonna look to do to defend this kind of arm lock? Well, one of the most immediate things is, since this is the arm getting broken, the other arm comes to the rescue. So he grabs it like this, okay? Probably one of the easiest grip defenses to break too, because from this point here, I'm just gonna take my hand, I'm gonna karate chop it by his front knuckles here, and I'm gonna start peeling. His elbow's based against my arm already, so I'm gonna start peeling back this way, and it makes a little wrist lock. Now, I may tap him with the wrist lock, or the wrist lock may just be a pain compliance kind of move and a structural kind of thing to where I can use it to break the grip and then start to get back to my regular standard kind of arm bar. That's one way he may do it. So just by grabbing this one. Now, if he does more of a butterfly grip here like this, where he's got all the fingers involved, even if There's only like, what, 6 of them, 5 of them?
Something like that.
Yeah, so when he's got all fingers involved, wrist to wrist, this is one of the stronger connection points here. Something that I can look to do from this position, I can start, again, pulling them together, sometimes unhooks them, because the power of that defense comes from the pull here. Something else that I can look to do here, and this takes a little bit more of a process, but it's good for whenever it can be used. I'm gonna put this part of my leg behind this thigh. So I'm completely switching sides. I'm taking my head off of my leg off his head, and I'm switching to here. And you notice how whenever I switched across his body, it bunched his 2 arms up. Now that arm is essentially free. I can maybe finish from top or sit off to the other side here and finish getting that arm lock. So that's another way that we can look to defend on that one. Sometimes on that same one though, if I don't feel like that's worth taking the risk of journeying across the body, sometimes just going for the pressure lock right here. So I'll take my south side leg and I'll put it right on top of his grip connection, right? And it's probably not gonna withstand that too for very long. It's very unpleasant whenever you get there and you put this leg on top of the wrist connection. And then from there, this hand should stay on my leg, but I'm gonna go here and extend to make that pressure. And then to relieve that pressure, the person often will let go here, if they can. And so as they let go, then I've still got my arm lock intact. So that's another way we can look to break that. Ones that you'll also see, which are not bad, they're just not the highest percentage ones. A lot of times you'll get here and you'll see people start to try to push, if you're clasping your hands, they'll try to push the arms apart here. And it's possible for this person here to be so strong that my whole deadlift versus their arm connection is not gonna win. What I do think is a good thing about this is to fake this one. Fake it, really sell it, maybe you'll get it, but fake it in the sense of I'm push, 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 and then I'm gonna make, just to make space to slip my bottom leg through. Now that this leg is through the loop of his arms, I can start to bring my leg off his head, grab my own shin here, and then now I'm gonna start to lift and guide him back. As I come up and guide him back, I'm gonna bring that connection there, and I'm gonna get my triangle. It's a little bit of an off-center triangle, but the way he comes up makes it the perfect shape for getting that. So again, when we're in this position, I may use this leg here to try to push and sell him on the idea that I want to get that arm separated. But all I'm really doing is just making the space to slip this leg through here. Now my north side hand is gonna come behind his neck, and I'm gonna grab it as far up my shin as I can, or crawl it up my shin. As I start to lean back with him, I'm gonna bring him up and put this leg on top, way behind his neck. And now I've got my nice triangle set up from there, right? So that's a couple other good ways to look at how to separate those hands out. Now, one of the more difficult ones from here is whenever he goes like more rear naked choke style grip. And this is actually a really good defense for Ed, because he's taking this hand and he's hiding it, biting, and then hiding his second hand behind my leg. So if I just sit here and pull, it's gonna be very difficult. If I try to push that off, it's gonna be difficult. The pressure lock is difficult, no triangle to be had. So I've gotta be a little bit more innovative about how we clear this one. So what I'm gonna look to do here is I'm gonna grab my thigh with this south side arm here. So I'm going through his arm, grabbing my thigh. Again, if I push, it's not gonna get the job done. So I'm gonna have the C-clamp at the ready. So when I pop this leg off of his head, I'm gonna palm strike and separate those 2 arms. As I separate it, I'm gonna bring my leg back over and pull his arm on the inside. So what I've done is I've cleared his grip behind my knee, and I've also separated the 2 hands. Now I start to unfold it, and I'm back to my arm bar. One more time on this one. We get here, Ed's doing a great job defending. I grab the outside of my thigh here. My second hand's gonna come through. As I move it, palm strike and pull back to replace the leg. Slide up on the arm here, elongate, and then I get my straight arm bar from there. Now, these have all been like really important things to identify the breaking mechanics as far as how to isolate that elbow joint, how to take a lot of the mobility out of the shoulder, because that's a big ball and socket joint, and even how to isolate some of the twisting of the wrist. So let's look though just real quickly about how this applies to the inverse of this, which is the guard position. Whenever I'm going to isolate the arm bar from the guard, something that often gets left out is people will do this. They'll see the overextension of the arms from an unskilled opponent, and them being unskilled themselves, they'll try to throw the leg over to here, and this does not make an arm bar. Ed's got a really easy defense just by tucking his elbow back inside right now, and I'm gonna lose that arm bar, right? So it's very important that we look at the trailing leg as well as the leg that's covering the head. So the first thing that I want to look to start to do, I need to notice where's my opportunity for the arm bar. And it's not necessarily always just having to see this completely stretched out, elongated, and reaching. That's great, and very novice people will do that. But if he's a little bit more conservative about keeping his arms drawn in like this, then there's new landmarks I need to look for. So this is something I want to look for here. So check this out. When I can get if I look at this shoulder to elbow line right here, this shoulder's not really sticking out. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get his elbow tucked in. There's a variety of ways we can do that. I can just go like this, that's cool. Or I can cross grip there, that's cool. Either way, this shoulder is sticking out now. My second hand is typically gonna frame or monitor somehow. And then the last piece now, that I have that angle, I'm gonna leapfrog up and capture that shoulder. Once I've captured that shoulder, now I kind of own this arm. He still has defensive measures, but my job now is to keep the hands separated and make sure everything else is in alignment. Now, we talked about this trailing leg. You notice how when I leapfrogged, this trailing leg rode up, knee pit to armpit. It's very important. And I'm locking the top one that's locking the shoulder, that one goes underneath, so I have extra pressure to be able to keep that arm isolated. Now, to finish the arm lock from here, helpful tip here, sometimes I can just go like this and get the bent arm lock instead, so I don't have to make the transition of hopping over his head. But if you don't feel like that's an option, or you feel more secure with the straight arm, I'm gonna push his head away, and I wanna lead with my knee is gonna come around his head and tuck that elbow in. The thing I should see at the end of this is that my legs are sticking up, the knees are pointing the same direction essentially, and I've got a tight squeeze with my hips around the base of his tricep or shoulder. Now I can come back and find that double wrist grip, and I can reach up here, and I'm tucking my heels down and lifting my hips straight up through the angle of his elbow. I'm not trying to push him away, and that's a common mistake people will often make, right? So one more time. I get that elbow or that shoulder protruding over the shoulder protruding over the elbow somehow. I frame, I leapfrog to capture, and then I'm gonna base the head away. Can I keep these grips? Absolutely, I can, right? Sometimes staying on the elbow works just fine, and keeping the wrist. If I need to go both hands on the wrist, I can, but I like to keep this elbow here for extra security because it makes it harder for him to pull his arm out. It also gives a little protection to my groin, so if he's trying to bend his elbow and dig it into my groin, it doesn't hurt quite as bad. So that's another little tip that we can use for that here. The big thing though that you need to look at is to make sure this trailing leg is active and that you're really isolating that shoulder. Those are maybe two of the biggest details. If he's overextending and he's just coming in like straight murder choking me like this here, like this, right? So which again, super novice energy, you'll get this sometimes. From here, I don't want to try to climb my legs up because the angle of my hips is wrong. I need to get perpendicular. Right now our spines are in line, I want to get perpendicular to him. As I go to do that, I'm gonna put my hand against his leg and against his shoulder as a big steering wheel. And I'm gonna turn me around the steering wheel. As I do that, this leg slides up until it finds his armpit. This leg comes over the head now, right? And then again, I bite here with the heels down. I come back to find the wrist and I get my extension, I get that straight arm bar. So if you're failing on this spinning arm bar, one of the biggest culprits is typically that this trailing leg is being lazy and hanging out behind. You've got to keep it in line as you rotate the hips. So again, he's overreaching here this way. I want to scoop in, rotate here, good bite. So my knee pit is in the armpit, my other knee pit is on his neck. I come back and I get this extension. Heels down, hips up through the angle of his elbow, right? So essentially, the biggest thing that I like to get across whenever we're talking about fundamentals, and let me know too, like in the comments, that if which one of these you like to use, or which one of these was a helpful detail, or if I didn't address a detail that you need, let me know in the comments. But one thing I like to emphasize about all of these whenever we are going through the list of armbar checklists is that think about it beginning with the end in mind, right? I like to think about that with a lot of different transitional movements. Sometimes we can get kind of lost in the forest for the trees, and I can think, okay, what was step number 16 again? And that's why people oftentimes like say there's too many steps, because they're trying to memorize steps and not realizing what this is really working toward. Because a lot of the time, maybe 10 years ago, it took me 15 steps to set up an arm bar, and now it takes me 5, maybe it takes me 7, maybe it takes me 2, you know, but whatever it is, think about what's the end result I want to see and accomplish. And then that will keep me tethered on that path, right? And if something happens between now and then, right, my end in mind, maybe we slap and bump, and I'm like, the end is me on his back choking him, right? if somewhere along the line Ed gives me an arm bar, I'm gonna take the arm bar, right? So, but the end result is stays kind of consistent in my head, and that keeps me directed on a path where I don't feel like I'm lost in the woods a lot of the time. So anyway, I appreciate you, brother. Some kind of sale happening at xmartial.com right now, and so check out all their gear. We wear more of their stuff than we wear anything else, so it's good to give them a shout out. They've got really cool gear over there, and they're always really cool to their sponsored people too. So yeah, we'll put a little discount code in the comments, either Ed's or mine, and appreciate you guys watching this video. Let me know if it helped. Thanks a lot.